Hey guys,
Hello.
I have some things to share. I'm excited about. How's everybody doing?
I'm doing okay.
Okay, so
I am not having the same energy that you do, but that's okay.
you're not having the same what?
Energy.
Oh, I actually I've been so I thought I would have a design lockdown for some things at the middle of last week, and I thought I was done and I made a plan, and then I slept on it, and then I thought some more, and I was like, oh no. And so over the weekend, up until last night, and even a little bit this morning, I've kind of updated the design documents that I'm sharing now. Um, I'm in the middle of refactoring the plan, the implementation plan. I have ADHD, so if I don't have like an OCD level plan that I make for myself, I don't make everybody else do it. Um, then I get lost. But
I'm just getting our meeting notes going.
yeah,
Do people need a link to that or?
no.
Oh
Go.
man.
Okay.
You just dropped the link in at the top.
Oops.
No, I that
Yeah,
was
I did. That was
question.
me.
Okay.
Yes. That's one thing. And then there's a second document. There's a bunch of stuff I haven't made. I've been using the Graphtastic org. I made it a long time ago. Just to like fast iterate because I like to use GitHub for editing workflows and things. Um, and I didn't want to put all this in the TOC repo. Um, Second one that describes um, so as it's just the three of us, I can talk through this or I can go catch up to real time while you guys have a look. How does everybody prefer to like see new things? But
Um,
these two
you've
documents
got
are like the result of the last 2 or 3 weeks of like thinking and design time. Um,
yeah. Let me see what we've got here.
do you want me to share a screen or
I'm just trying to figure out how much there is. If there
so
is,
I don't want to go through it all today. Um,
I was going to say, if there's 20 pages, then having us catch up async
well,
without a guide is not going to be very useful to me.
yeah. So if I can share a screen, I'll show you a couple pictures and we'll talk for a minute or two, and then we
Okay.
can schedule time for um, uh, going deeper. But I wanted to kind of circle back and provide an update of some of my thoughts about one of the reference architectures.
Oh, and
Um,
don't let me take things over, Jen, um, unless you want me to. So
yeah, I mean, we could start maybe
I'm
at the
not
higher
I'm
level.
not afraid to talk.
Yeah.
I know, me too, and I want to make sure we don't drown out Jen. Um, oh my God, for some reason, this house we're in like randomly has flies. Anyway, um, right. So
I was just gonna say that the pictures are good. I'm listening in off camera at the beginning because I'm also multitasking eating lunch. So,
yeah, I do that too when I
yeah,
eat and stuff.
yeah.
I looked at old tag observability videos of like, yeah, there's Matt the co-chair, like, nom, 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 you know, when other people are talking. So, um, right. So at a high level for the initiative, there's a like there's a couple like super high level things that I'm a little behind on, but didn't make sense to do until I could kind of see at least a concrete path to actually delivering something scoped. But we need to in GitHub make a update the project with like 3 or 4 high-level story arcs, if you will, or epics, Jen, as you talked about, and then we could just make sub issues and subtasks and organically grow it from that. But they are one creation of end user materials, and project, just creation of the art, like guidance. If we're going to do guidance documentation around CRA or other topics, or more likely curate it, because over the last week I've gone to some meetings and things that were recommended from the previous week, and gotten a whole bunch of resources that I'm in the middle of compiling and curating. But I knew that the canon was large, but it's deep and wide, and it's been.
And it's not all our job either.
No, it is not.
It is.
So,
Well,
we're probably, I think we need to either like, part of the guidance we create might be new things that we create, or more likely they're things that we weave together and present in a consumable way.
Yes, there's also some interesting discussion, and I don't know the current latest status of this, as to whether or not any of the LF is going to be a steward for these projects or not, which carries requirements under the CLA.
Right.
And if the CNCF is not a steward, then the requirements to the projects are, do this stuff on a best effort basis. So I don't know that we need to figure that out first, but it's good to remember that there is an out to all of this, which is to say, hey, actually, we aren't going to be classified as a steward. So, good luck.
Right. Yes. So let me go first briefly and just enumerate what I think are like the 3 or 4 top level epics. And again, I can't type and talk, but
that's fine. If you say, I will type.
Okay, one is what we were just discussing. So like whatever shape that forms that. The second is a set of reference architectures that are, usable and open. I know Brant is working on an air-gapped one for later in September. I haven't synced with him yet to get details, but that's one example of like, hey, here's how you can run Guac air-gapped. There's what I've been doing in that Graptastic org, and I'll provide context for that in a second, but there's sort of a, not related to this initiative, there's a broader effort I've been incubating in my head for a couple of years, and really over the last few months from a design perspective to kind of make sure it feels right. But that's that Graptastic platform thing, and within that model, there's a way to do things like Guac, as described in that doc. Not just Guac, but a different pattern or I don't want to say paradigm, but a different architecture than what is being done by Mario in the context of Kubernetes and the CNCF, which is not technically part of this initiative, but it is adjacent to it. So I don't think you can like count on them for deliverables, but I still want to track them.
Well, and in some cases, it may make sense to just draft off of them.
Exactly. Right. So, right.
So that's your second epic.
That's the second epic, and a TLDR on the approach I'm taking in the reference architecture design I've been working on is not a centralized, let's make all the SBOMs and then adjust them, but it's more of a how do we make SBOMs at the point of when they're being built by the projects, and then at that point run, create additional artifacts, which are then at a second phase brought into a more centralized graph. So it's a little more scalable in that way. So we were talking about artifacts that we're going to deliver, reference architectures, and there's sort of like 3 that we're watching, but more are welcome. A third overall epic, I think, is what sort of non-documentation materials might we want to do. Like we had talked about both in the meetings and with various stakeholders in the lead up to this, it'd be cool to have a bunch of like short, focused, single digit minute videos, right, from this
That's
effort.
documentation content, isn't it?
Well, I was separated. That's why I said sort of like non-written.
Oh,
Yes,
non-written. Okay. I
it
heard
is content,
non-documentation. So
but a lot of the like document-based outputs of this, I really do think after seeing the massive number of existing stuff, much of which is like exactly what we need, even from the CNCF, like the new version of the supply
yeah.
chain paper has like a bunch of the stuff that we need. It's just we just need to point to it or
And getting people to read all of it can be hard.
right. And so I kind of saw like from a work stream perspective,
Mhm.
particularly if we go to solicit and grow the number of people that are working on this, which I think we can do if we do it intentionally. It's a different persona and a different set of things entirely. It's like production for YouTube and video content is just a
Yeah.
totally different set of disciplines. So I thought it made sense to track it there. In addition, I don't know if we're going to actually do it. It would require contribution within the scope of this. So that's a third sort of epic, and then a fourth. I don't know if it needs its own epic or if it's just something we do, but like all of the, should this be a sub project? Should it not? What does that look like? All of the um, Hearts and Minds tour, for something big like that to be effective, then there's advocacy that needs to happen to the TOC.
Is there an epic in there of evaluating the results? Where does
Yeah.
that fit?
Yeah, no.
I would like to see us evaluate the results before we commit to going out and evangelizing stuff.
Oh, right. No, I'm not committing. I'm just saying, like, okay, if this thing is 6 to 9 months, what does it look like? Like, let's block it out. And again, since now we have like roadmaps,
Mhm.
we could just do Gantt charts.
Yeah.
So, that's a great point. So I'm gonna stop talking for a second and see what you folks think. There's obviously more things that I'm probably missing, but I want to type it a little bit.
The reason I wanted to explicitly call out evaluate results as a target is I have been on projects that have lined up and basically committed that they were going to evangelize before they had results. And
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree. I remember you saying one of your very first lines in the
yeah.
sand, as your in your
Mhm.
I'm trying to be specific because new people might look at this.
Yeah.
In your role as tag security and compliance
Yeah.
liaison to this effort,
Mhm.
you correctly identified that we need to either have a sub-project application come out of this initiative, or
Mhm.
we need to articulate why a sub-project isn't requisite.
Yeah.
And I have not made a determination in my own mind, obviously, about that either.
Yeah. I guess
But
additionally, maybe a sub project is the right way to run this long term. Maybe it turns out that a single shot example is the way to go. And maybe we discover that all these tools aren't quite fit for purpose.
yeah, exactly. Like we don't know. Jen has her hand up.
Yeah.
I was just curious if we do end with yes, this should be a sub project. What types of initiatives would be a follow on after it is established as a sub project? Would it be like ongoing maintenance of the materials? Would we be managing infrastructure? I'm just kind of curious, like what would warrant a sub project and what do we see that
Right.
executing on?
I have thoughts about that, but Evan, did you want to go first? I'm trying to
No, go
be
ahead.
okay. So yes, if it were a sub project, I think ongoing maintenance would hopefully be one of the more minor things. I've been using a design that does not specifically have a bunch of infrastructure needed for most of what's needed. The only infrastructure is needed when an end user or someone on their home lab or whatever wants to go realize and materialize this and actually run analysis on it. So I would hope that a large infrastructure budget, time or materials or whatever, isn't part of that. What I think would be part of that would be things that are further out, like working with LFX um, on not just like here's how you can technically get it a bunch of data in graph form, but like here's an ongoing set of industry uh, domain experts on software supply chain security who are advising on how to use this data, uh, with an eye towards the TOC and the CNCF's own values and methodologies within the Linux Foundation. And then the other kind of like longer term thing would be once ostensibly we have something that works for the CNCF and that graph and community, there's a hypergraph, or a much more bigger universe full of galaxies, just like the CNCF within the Linux Foundation, who could benefit from analogous tooling or the same tooling. And so it would be more an ongoing outreach and sync with the rest of the Linux Foundation, who their communities have the same sorts of, we posit, needs and requirements that the CNCF does. No, Evan, you have your hand up.
I think in addition to that, if we discover that building this graph and curating these queries are useful, there may be ongoing development of new queries
Yes.
for new types of information. And, you can imagine updates to all the SPDX formats and so forth, and including additional data and looking at, for example, not just software composition, but, if you have an entire system, which ones were built at a certain salsa level, or,
Exactly.
oh, hey, we're concerned that this particular build processor system may have been compromised. What downstream systems do we have to look at? Is the type of question that you might ask if you had this kind of graph. So I think additional, queries and data fields ingested and managed. And we might discover that Guac is not necessarily the right tool for this, or for some of these things as well.
I'm sure. Yes, Guac is not the hammer for every nail. In fact, if we get into my recommendation around Guac, I think Guac by itself categorically can't work for a couple of reasons that I have a solution to. I think those are all great points, and I would like to add, I think that a sub project that runs could also be chartered with fostering and facilitating a community of practitioners within the cloud native ecosystem, right? From a variety of disciplines, but an ongoing concern, right? A group that meets regularly and provides thought leadership and a clearing, a neutral place for thought validation, and as well as, activities like perhaps a quarterly update, right, on what are all the major things, in this space of note, whether it's changes or upgrades to tooling, or it's security vulnerabilities that had broad industry impact. It's that would be the right, I think, positionally, the right place for a group like that to exist, and quarterly or twice yearly or something like that, put out sort of like a state of the software supply chain ecosystem for cloud native.
There's also a software supply
lastly,
chain technical community group
Yeah,
that's forming.
exactly. And I think that's one of the ways the sub project can realize that end, right? Not to duplicate or have it, but to work and coordinate it with it. Because I think also that same community of practitioners, they're the people who would be actually looking at the reports or the visualizations or the tools to understand the shape of their transitive dependency graphs, right, at scale, or at workload granularity. And so if part of that shared set of Batman utility belt items, for practitioners, is like shared Jupyter notebooks or visualization libraries or whatever is useful that the community comes up with. I think that too is, maybe that gets rolled into a sandbox project one day under the tools, banner, or maybe it just lives as an awesome list of other things that are out in the ecosystem that are useful tools with demos and things. I don't know, but managing that, I think, is part of that sub projects domain. And I think it, lastly, I think for that to be successful, we would need to sort of jumpstart it and have a seed of that coming as part of the contributors to this initiative, which is why I think once we kind of get rolling with some early wins in the first maybe third of the time span, so the first quarter, if it's a 9-month effort, in that second quarter, when we have something to point at, it's always easier for people to join something that's already rolling than to help start it. So I kind of view us now in the, by force of will, push the stone up the hill. But I think if we can gel even the beginnings of a community like that, then it gives the sub project application more weight with the TOC, because there's humans that are interested and contributing. So I feel like my self timer for Matt has talked too long continuously has just been exceeded. So what are you all saying? And hi, Carolina. I also wanted to give her a call out. She just joined a few minutes ago. I've been working. I've been telling her last week and even Friday, like, oh wait, don't read docs yet. I'm about to push changes, and so I now have those docs ready for some feedback. And I've already started working on the implementation phase, and I have some of the initial things running. So we'll get to it later when I share a screen. But
I think all that made sense and it answered my question. I had the same thought about the technical community group, because one of the outputs, if I go read the issue, says software supply chain tooling. And so I thought, oh, there might be some overlap or synergies there. So
yeah, or perhaps what we develop as part of reference architectures can go live there, because I want to be careful that all of these toolings and stuff, even if they're just for reference examples, I don't think those should live in the TOC GitHub repo. Right, that seems like the wrong place. In OpenTelemetry, they kind of have the same thing where they have community groups. So for example, the new OTel browser SIG, which looks at browser side observability and collection of metrics, that's technically a community group, and community groups can have GitHub repos where things land without like a tag related initiative being a kingmaker. Right, so that's what I was getting at a few meetings ago, when suggesting that we create a contrib repo, something that that puts a layer of separation between tag activities and community chest, right?
So OTel and Knative both have a lot of repos.
Oh, they have a ton of them. Yes.
Um,
I just meant to your earlier comments about, like, if we're going to start doing tooling and choosing tooling in a tag initiative, that kind of makes the tag a kingmaker potentially, and that it's a sticky.
I think we can avoid doing that by making it clear that these are, a set of choices, and we welcome additional sets of choices being plugged in.
Okay. Yeah, I also didn't want to put every little commit. Like, just making the specs was like 100 commits or something, because I tend to work on a lot of things and keep GitHub
Yeah.
as, like, where was I?
But I feel like forks and PRs give sort of a natural way to manage some of that stuff and get shared understanding. And right now the TOC is aiming towards a mono repo.
I see that, and it's going to be a really big one. I've worked on some big repos, but like,
I think that we should see where that goes before we go and try to create a additional repo elsewhere. One of the problems that we've had in Knative is it can be hard for new people to figure out where to approach things, because a pile of repos doesn't have a natural navigational sense. And so I think the TOC is attempting to leverage the monorepo to be able to provide navigational hints and context.
I concur.
So let's give that a try. And if everyone hates it, then that'll be some good feedback for the TOC.
Yeah, Yeah, certainly for project materials and some of the things like that. Absolutely. But
I think even for the initiative, let's
no, no,
get
no.
code on
I mean, like every tool that would that might like for example, Brandt's reference architecture that he
Yeah.
mentioned on air gapped guac. That's not going to live under TOC. Like the implementation of it, I wouldn't think. I imagine he's
Why not?
working on that.
Like he can work on it in a fork, and then he can PR it in.
Sure, sure. We should talk about it.
Yeah.
I think from a practical perspective, when I get into presenting kind of some of the stuff I've been working on, it might be evident because it's intrinsic. There's a lot of moving pieces that need to live in different repos specifically. But in any event,
Yeah.
there's one more, at least one more main epic that we should capture, and that has to do with some of the feedback from Emily and you, Evan, and everybody else that
Mhm.
we need to be doing outreach to a variety of different projects within the CNCF at different levels, um, all levels, to rationalize our plans and ensure alignment. Um,
I mean, in particular, if our plan is to have them produce S-bombs that are usable in our project, then yes, we're
yes,
asking potentially for a lot of work.
quite a bit. Which is why I think we need a simple random sample. Emily also suggested that um, she also suggested that as we reach out to projects, we align that with projects that are already applying to move levels or enter the sandbox. Um, Although I think most of this is more relevant for incubation and graduation level, that we should still have some in the sandbox. And so that's, I know we're going to do that for Knative.
Mhm.
That one's a no-brainer since through two of the three people on the call today, um, one would be interview. Yeah, I guess you could be interviewer and interviewee, but we should bring in more people from Knative, for example, because they're applying to move levels,
Mhm.
and there are others that are in active review in the sandbox, and so I think that makes sense too, and will help put the efforts of this initiative on the mental radar of the
I mean,
TOC.
it may also make sense to start by assessing, okay, hey, we want to use S-bombs that projects are already creating.
Mhm.
What fraction of, what fraction of projects can we just find S-bombs for without having to, contact them and everything
Yeah,
else?
I haven't found a table of that yet, so I was gonna actually write some stuff.
I'm not sure if
Yeah.
we have a table.
Well, I think a quick script could go look at all the repos in the CNCF project ecosystem and then say, look at the release artifacts and say, do SBOMs appear to be there? That seems like it wouldn't be too hard of a data collection thing to do with a script. So maybe I'll do that.
I think that would be very informative.
Yeah, because otherwise it's like, 200 plus projects, and
Or
then
more, if you
or
include
more. And then
sandbox.
many of them have a bunch of sub repos, or a bunch of an entire organization, right? So like hotel, but as well as dialogue. So anyway, that last plan epic, I think, should be outreach there, and I don't think we should underestimate how much time and effort that might be. I know Kubernetes and hotel are on the short list, as well as Knative, um, uh, because but I also don't want to start with all of the biggest ones. So I actually think
I think doing a survey to figure out, okay, what fraction of CNCF projects have usable S-bombs
right.
would um, would be a good place to start if we have a plan that says, hey, we're going to use projects S-bombs.
So, isn't there some machinery or way within the CNCF to send a survey out to all CNCF project maintainers?
Um,
There must be, right? I mean, we could just do it ourselves, but
we should do it ourselves to start with.
okay. No, I mean the
Otherwise,
survey,
we're
right?
we're putting a tax on all the CNCF projects
So I think I could actually discover a bunch of it as I
for
described.
our
That
initiative.
seems straightforward to me. Um,
We, I think that I have some experience here. I
Good.
would like I would like my experience to be disproven.
Okay, what's been your experience?
I think that your notion that it's a small matter of scripting is you're going to end. It's going to end in
Tonight.
tears after 3 days.
I guess in my mind, I'm thinking if the S-bomb and other artifacts are not persisted as artifacts with the release binaries or release materials themselves, then they don't matter.
And
So, like with that simplifying assumption, I think a script can get things that look like S-bombs. But to know to know the level.
I hear that assumption, and I think that you will be better informed if you try writing that script.
Okay. Challenge accepted. I'll come back next week with either a failure story and some tears or some kind of.
I mean, Jen, feel free to tell me that I'm off base.
Again, those S-bombs may or may not be enriched. They might be, there's lots of different kinds of S-bombs. They could be, diagnostic, ones, or they could be high-level worthless ones that are just SCA alone, which you could get from, but I'm sorry, Jen, go ahead.
We can find them, first of all.
Yeah, I was thinking, I mean, it might be simpler instead of writing a script. Like there's lots of people in probably both our tags that are CNCF project maintainers. I'm a maintainer of a CNCF project that publishes S-bombs. So I was thinking like what we could ask our tag members if we only need like a few of them. Like John, I'm sure he would know. Then we just make a spreadsheet.
I can make a big spreadsheet with all the projects. Well, one line per project and some columns, and then that could, and you just say grassroots it, and maybe in a week we've got.
Well, I was going to say, do that. We can start with like 10 or 15.
Yes.
And see if you can script those 10 or 15.
Oh, sure.
And then
do it TDD style.
Script those 10 or 15, let's dump another 50 and see what the results look like.
Okay.
So right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, so we can start that way. That's nice. We have we know these 15 to be true, and then that script can follow sort of a test-driven development methodology, or at least a testing framework from the get-go. That's great. So Jen, so what project are you working on, or what projects that produce S-bombs do you contribute to, or were you referring to?
I'm one of the maintainers of the OSCAL Compass CNCF project. It's a sandbox project. And
oh, cool. Yeah, I'm familiar.
Yeah. So one of the projects that we're working on the V2 release of, we just started using Go Releaser to produce S-bombs, and it might be a good test because they're pretty new and they might need some refinement. So there we go.
Yeah. Cool. And I imagine Knative makes S-bombs. Like I haven't actually looked to see, but I would just assume, given their application to graduation.
Yes. I think you've made a starting assumption that is more interesting than you realize.
Well, I know what the guidelines for review for incubation and graduated projects are from the CNCF, and there's a lot of language about security artifacts. So I did kind of make an inference there. That's why I want to check it.
How do you find the release artifacts for a project?
Well, therein lies some of the complexity, right? Like particularly for something like OTEL, where the project's umbrella is a huge amount of binaries, and there's not necessarily a repo to binary correlation. Some repos are effectively library repos, others are sort of producing artifacts. So like there's quite a lot of complexity there.
Yes. And in some
when
cases,
I was boasting of a script, that was more like are any S-bombs anywhere as an initial first pass, to just
and some projects
are there any S-bombs I can find in any of the release artifacts from the last month?
But I think finding the release artifacts may be more challenging than you expect.
Okay, yeah. Well, so there's another initiative looking at release guidance. I would assume that some combination of GitHub releases and Docker releases, or container releases that the project manages. First places to go.
Some projects produce Helm charts.
Mm-hmm.
Some projects
release those Helm charts via GitHub, right? So the Helm chart has a version number, typically. Anyway, I mean,
okay,
really scary, but
but the Helm chart also has references to container images.
Yes. Okay. So this gets gnarly pretty quick. Again, I was just looking for proof of life.
Yes,
230
my
projects.
Point is that you are making
how many of them have no S-bombs that I can find anywhere? in any
Well,
artifact. So,
um,
which doesn't mean they don't exist, I suppose, but if they're not
yes,
findable,
exactly. It doesn't mean
they
they
might as
don't
well not
exist.
exist.
It means that they are not very useful to you, but someone has potentially put the effort into producing them.
And maybe the project is using them internally, I suppose.
Well, it's also possible that we've put a whole bunch of work into something that is not actually valuable.
Oh, you mean the whole, okay, well, I'm not going to get.
Well, no, I don't mean that the S-bombs aren't valuable. I mean, we've put a lot of effort into producing an S-bomb and nobody can find it.
Yeah, sure.
I will share with you a story
Final,
that Craig McLucky has shared a number of times about the Spring Security team when he was reviewing that as a VP at VMware.
Yeah.
And they gave a elaborate presentation about how they secured Spring releases and how they signed all the contents before uploading them to Maven Central.
Okay.
And Craig asked, how do people get the public key?
Yeah.
For the
And they
signatures
see
that
what
they
the
had made.
S-bombs actually
And
were.
they did not distribute the public key. So they signed all of the Spring releases and nobody had the public key to validate them.
Well, then they're not super useful, are they? Yeah.
That's my point about S-bombs.
No, I concur.
Let's validate that we are able to find them from projects that we know produce them.
I think something similar there is around tooling. Not to get too sidetracked, but the other initiative that we talked about last week at Tag Security around best, good practices for release and how should people generate, or what are the different good ways to generate SBOMs. I was directed to an OpenSSF SBOM group. I attended it. It so happened that when I learned of it at 8
It was
p.m.
the same day, yeah.
It was the same day. So
We
I
were
went
there.
to the meeting. I was there. I don't think you, but
no, we were at the Tag Security meeting.
Yeah. No, later on that day, I went to the actual OpenSSF meeting, and I mean this with all respect, and I'm not disparaging anything, but I did not get confidence that they will be producing that which we seek. It seems like a thinly held coalition. There was a lot of venting and opinion giving, subjective opinion giving. And when I asked a couple kind of basic questions, mostly around like, what's the scope of the group? Is this in scope? Is that I pretty much everything I mentioned, with a few exceptions, was out of scope. And I was directed to the OpenSSF water cooler. And then they do have a working doc, and it's like a page and a half long and doesn't have anything in it yet. So I don't know that that's going to be a source, but
I guess
there is not yet consensus. Clearly,
there is not yet consensus.
I
think is a valid representation of the state, and
Yeah.
there are a lot of people who are interested who have conflicting points of view.
Yes, and sometimes
there's not. We are at the opposite of rough consensus and working code.
Yeah. So I'm not looking for a handout there, clearly. So that Project Epic around finding guidance.
Yeah. I think it's important for us to understand the state of the facts on the ground.
Correct.
When we try doing this.
And I think actually that reality forms part of the rationale for this effort existing.
I mean, if we can break through and make some of this stuff functional, that would be great and super useful.
Indeed.
But it's also clear that just waiting and hoping it will happen, and assuming that no one has bothered to put this stuff together before, misses some of the parts that are hard.
Exactly.
And like, I kind of hate how hard it is to figure out where the artifacts for Knative are. I think we screwed some stuff up, to be completely honest. But at the same time, finding the set of artifacts for a software release is hard.
Have you looked at the GitHub stuff? Not the immutable artifact stuff that we were talking about in Slack, but I tripped over some docs on how to serve SBOMs out via REST on GitHub's dime. Like, I haven't tracked it through and actually tried it.
But dependencies API thing.
But that doesn't just let you slurp down an SBOM, though, right? Does that kind of like break it into?
It may give you an SBOM.
Or is
You
it
still have the challenge of figuring out what is the stuff I'm running. Oh, I just remembered one more awesome thing.
By the way, this is why I just thought it made sense that SPOM should be with release artifacts, like in GitHub with the tagged release, because then like there's not a hosting problem, and you know.
Just a minute. I'm going to make you real happy here.
Okay, I'm gonna turn my camera off because I have to go over there and get a fly spotter, or I'm gonna go insane.
That's fine.
All right.
Cool. So we were talking about how some projects will publish a Helm chart or a YAML file or something like that that contains links to all of their images. Some of them will publish an operator, which means that the set of images is actually managed by software that's in the operator image. And I'm sure Jen may have some answers for this, but it seems like discovering all the container images that are in a release that uses operator as the install method may be extra hard. You're now muted.
You're talking about like, oh, sorry.
I thought I'd be able to hear all the way out to the other room, and I turned around at the midpoint, and so like I caught the beginning and the end, but not the middle. When I came back, you said operators, but Helm charts.
So you can potentially expand a Helm chart with Helm template,
Of course.
and then look through it and hope to find all of the container images it references.
That's what I used to do for my stuff anyway. For any Helm charts, I would render them and then
you can
commit
hopefully
that
do
so
that.
you can see in the changelog, like.
Yeah. So,
I had to do this too for air gapped image copying, having to look through a Helm chart, find all the images, and then copy them over.
I was going to say air gap is actually probably a really important thing. And my call out was that the operator pattern makes this even harder, because the image may be encoded in a binary that's in the operator container. For example,
I know.
Knative uses an environment variable to tell you the image of the Q proxy that should be loaded alongside each user container, Knative serving. So you don't need to just look in the image fields. You need to look for other image-like things in stuff like environment variables and config maps.
I'll say briefly, there's also the Q language configurations, and then KCL are all also the same pattern. But Jen, when I came back in an effort to
customize, and
you were about to say something, and I wanted to make sure we didn't lose that.
Oh, I was just based on like what Evan was saying. I was thinking the word OLM flashed in my head of pulling images that way, and then you have your operator with its images, and then you have dependent operators or operators that might be loaded at runtime that have their images, and then there could be a chain of operators depending on other operators that are all resolved at runtime. I was thinking, oh, that's where it gets really fun.
So I can when I share my screen in a few minutes to go through some of that other stuff, I can give a link to it. I didn't make it public yet, but I had worked 3 weeks ago and have something actually kind of working. I'm just not super happy with it yet. A K3D cluster or a Klein cluster. Are we going to have to see CI workflows that just deploy all this stuff and then scrape through and do archaeology to do this? Like that.
I mean,
right. I mean, if
there were a standardized way for a container to say,
right, we're making late binding at runtime, to fundamentals that used to always be discoverable by inspection.
Yeah. And it may be that we find that, hey, actually containers, try installing this and look at all the containers it installs, and there's a way to find the SBOMs for the containers it installs is the way to figure it out.
Yep.
I
kind of like the idea of like that forming like a globally federated, registry, just like we have package registries, like, and it could be OCI based.
For container images, there's a standardized way to
right, exactly. And
the SBOM related to the container image.
Oh, there is already? Yeah. Oh, okay. I'll go
for containers.
Just for containers.
Is everybody using it? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a way of publishing SBOMs where you check them into your Git repo. And I'm like, okay, That's a choice you can make.
What, checking in an SBOM to a Git repo?
Yeah.
I would imagine some people do that. Like, what?
I suspect some people do, and that's
mean,
one of the different ways of finding an SBOM.
I suppose it's like, yeah, I'll leave it at that. There's nuance. Do you want me to take a couple minutes and go through,
Sure.
broad strokes, this graph-tastic stuff? But before that, Jen, is there, or Evan, is there anything else that we should talk about in our last few minutes? Since I'm sneak attacking people with big docs.
No, why don't you give us an overview of what you've worked on? And I'm going to just pick out a couple more projects that should have SBOMs so that you have a list of 15.
Hey, that's cool. Okay, so you guys can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It looks like the meeting notes I have on my screen.
Okay. So I just made this repo public 1 minute before the meeting. I've kind of been like working on some stuff for a while. And right now, this is all specware. I've got some implementation of various pieces of this already rolling locally, but I'm hoping in the coming days to have like fully working samples. I had hoped to have both specs and samples together at the same time, but at a super high level, and you should be able to get to this too. It defines like a hub and spoke model or a supergraph subgraph architecture for federated GraphQL, which is a great way to do queries across disparate data sets that have links between them. For example, what's in Guac and what's in the history of GitHub, or both of those things with a third subgraph for what are all the projects and people and things in the CNCF, right? And so in a nutshell, without going too deep, the idea of supergraph subgraph, which is not what this picture is necessarily, but the idea is you have a query engine that can split a query apart into the pieces that come from the different subgraphs in parallel, kind of fan out and query those subgraphs for the subquery content, and then reassembles a GraphQL query and returns it to a client. This is all great for client stuff. It's really not good for ETL. You never want to ETL over GraphQL. So it's optimized for that. There's an overall approach I'm taking to use Docker Compose just because it's a little more accessible than staring at Kubernetes manifests. But when I say Docker Compose in this model, and we're not going to go through it all, it's pluggable for the orchestrator. So the various subgraphs and the hubs or the supergraph, that federation piece, they're all done with Docker Compose, and I've used sort of a Go vendoring kind of approach. So the developer experience is like I clone it, the tooling pulls down the various different modules and subgraphs, and sidecars actually too. Again, Kubernetes style pattern, so it's easy to switch out the orchestrator later. But for now, Docker Compose based stacks are a little more accessible for devs and fast and easy and understandable. So that's kind of there is this overall tome, I called it. Oh darn, bad luck. That is quite a bit longer that I've been working on for weeks now. That kind of calls out the whole architecture for this, and I don't want to go deep into it. I'd love feedback on it, and I'm kind of in that first proving out point, so it still could change. But it kind of gets into some of the things I talked to very quickly. It talks about GraphQL Mesh. If you're not familiar with it, GraphQL Mesh can wrap REST, gRPC, Postgres, MySQL, or custom APIs with GraphQL. And it can also wrap a GraphQL API and transform it, perhaps to fix schema irregularities or to augment it with federation directives or any number of use cases. But the reason I'm scrolling down is I have a table in here and a broken diagram. Oh, damn. So there's something called the guild. If you're not familiar with the guild is sort of where a lot of the maintainers of GraphQL reside. And there's a bunch of projects they have, including Hive Gateway, which a few months ago reached v1.0. They've kind of decoupled that central gateway GraphQL Federation piece of breaking of our queries and things. and mesh. They've kind of disentangled them, and then there's also a schema registry that's an optional component. Uh, the last thing I'll say about the overall architecture I have is the Hive by default is sort of an always running infrastructure piece with a live schema registry, which can do a lot of cool things. But you can also use tools from this ecosystem to do things more in a CI stateful way, where the state is kept in GitHub. So you kind of have a schema composition about, what are all the versions of a subgraph that composed correctly, and and versioning for that, all being kept sort of in a declarative way. In addition, all configuration for these various tools can be like a bunch of curls to an endpoint, or interactive commands, or a declarative config command, which this is going for, so that it's very easy to reproduce locally without having to run a lot of infrastructure necessarily. So within the context of that overall supergraph, subgraph, Graphtastic platform thing, and just as a preview, if so, there's just a couple public repos now, but there's a bunch of things coming soon, and I'd love to open this up. I'm starting simple with just a couple easy to run, subgraphs that are based on static content, moving to dynamic content from databases, and that brings us to the Guac plan. So this document that I linked first is meant to stand alone, and can serve as a demonstrator for running basically Guac with mesh in front of it to fix some schema problems that make federation hard, as well as some of the foundational concepts, as well as things that move into why is it being done this way. And here, so in a nutshell, it's what I referred to before, where the model for this is we separate out, in order to build an aggregated graph of more than just a project, but of an ecosystem. We don't want to rely on Guac, because that's not really Guac's design center. It's really good at building and enriching graphs. It is unknown to what degree of scale, and I have opinions. It will work with its Postgres kind of relational database backend. It's great for what it does, but for getting bigger and scaling, I don't see it as a solution. So the idea here is, in a CI job, and I've got a prototype of this working already, Guac runs, ingests SBOMs and other stuff, and then enriches the graph, and then we use its GraphQL endpoint to smartly make RDF enclods of the data. RDF triples are subject. I assume, do you know what I mean by RDF? But I could
I am familiar with RDF. I don't know about Jen.
I've heard the term before.
It's resource description framework. Basically, it's kind of like a JSON lines file, except every line is not a JSON file, JSON object. It's a subject predicate triple of this belongs to that, or this is related to that. So it's as well as a type. And so it's a native import. It's like the CSV for graph data, where you would typically have lists of nodes, and then lists of or vertices, and lists of edges or relationships.
So it lets you store the nodes and the edges and properties on both the nodes and the edges.
Correct. So it's like a CSV file for a deconstructed labeled property graph in CS terminology. But the idea is that CI jobs could run at project scope, and whenever they go make SBOMs, they can run this GitHub action or script in the other CI systems of their choice that, again, uses Guac to pull it in, build the graph for just that SBOM, enrich it, and then export it as RDF as an artifact that can be found later. And then in a second phase, if you want to say, I care about the CNCF ecosystem, or I care about what's running in my data center, which is some stuff that I build myself and some stuff I get from CNCF projects and some stuff from otherwheres, much like you could have the same sets of subgraphs or Legos that could be put together in a super graph or a hub, in the hub spoke analogy. You can have multiple hubs that all kind of capitalize on overlapping sets of subgraphs. You could assemble aggregated sets of supply chain information by pulling in these RDFs from end sources, and then bulk ingesting them into a suitable graph backend. Now, in the past, as part of the landscape graph project, I've been using Neo4j for this kind of thing, but due to some licensing issues, I've looked at dgraph, and I've reached out to the project as well and talked to them a little bit over the last month or two. And dgraph is sort of a graph native, GraphQL native database that can bulk load all of these RDFs and then express a federation compliant GraphQL interface. Doesn't need federation, but it can work with federation for what's there. And so that's the overall difference in process from what Mario and the CNCF team are doing, where they're generating SBOMs all in a centralized way and then ingesting them into one big guac. So that's the approach I'm taking here from a high level design. And then this document, which is way too long to get into, kind of goes into some of the underlying comments. And then I take a look at the guac, the actual nouns and verbs in the guac ontology. And the two high level problems are guac's notion of a unique identifier is just guac local. It's not globally unique. And so for federation, you kind of need a way to say this is globally unique. And so I lay out a way to do that using GraphQL mesh and using the business composite primary key in terms of business entities that are called out in the ontology to make globally unique IDs. And then the other so basically we used Guac's own schema files and the Guac API. And then where it says augmentation script, this is actually GraphQL mesh. And then we get an API that's being served, even if it's just for that ETL process to do that. And then the second big reason for doing it is many of the at key is a federation directive. It's not for regular GraphQL, but when federating a schema, it's sort of like this is that globally unique entity's ID. I've kind of figured out how to do that for the Guac ontology for its various types. And then if anyone was super curious, the specific question I'm dealing with is the node union anti-pattern. And this is sort of like, I got a little bit nerdy and academic about it, but in a nutshell, here, I'm going to stop sharing because then I can just talk. It's kind of like using void star or overuse of unions in an object-oriented design, where because when you get because you would typically see it when you have a bunch of subclasses with a common base class, in some sort of collection, so you can polymorphically deal with it. Instead of getting a pointer to the base class, you're getting a union that unions together all of those different types. So now every client has to do special checks to try to ordain what kind of derived subclass you're dealing with. And so it complicates queries, and the client, it gives them brittle clients that every time, something changes in the interface to add a new subtype, for example, now every client is broken basically until it's updated. So it's a common GraphQL interface and graph modeling design pattern called the node union anti-pattern, and Guac has it. They use unions copiously, and so that's the other kind of, other than globally unique IDs and annotations for federation, fixing this sort of schema design pattern without having to do it upstream in Guac first, which might not ever happen.
I was going to say, have you talked to the Guac maintainers about it?
Yeah. I have a.
I mean, it's hard to change V1 APIs.
No,
but
and it's also, they're using a Go object graph modeler that generates a Postgres database. And so some of these sort of like node unions are because the GraphQL schema generated by the Postgres database effectively from that same Go middleware, the same Go middleware that generates the Postgres database that backs it all, as well as the GraphQL API, kind of has this design pattern baked in. And so you get these node unions because that's how they're handling it.
And that works very well in Go.
Yeah, and there's no reason, and there's not really a problem with it in Guac itself, because like when you run queries, they're implemented in Go anyway, right? And that does work well in Go. But when you're talking about federated GraphQL and scaling this up, it doesn't work at all.
Yeah,
but it doesn't have to, because we can just wrap it with mesh and transform it and provide some resolvers on the fly, which isn't that much work to do because there's not more than a handful of places where you have this node union anti pattern. It's kind of like, you know, the different kinds of CVEs and the different kinds of artifacts are treated as unions. And so that's what I'm looking to get around. There's also a bunch of other backgrounder documents because I had to learn some stuff to work on this design, like details on how to run dgraph, you know, the right way. It should lastly be noted that for dgraph, as well as some of the stuff out of the guild, there is not like signed official Helm charts for the Kubernetes configs for many of them, and there are known issues with many of them because they're community maintained Helm charts that are varying levels of maturity. And so by starting with a Docker Compose based approach, we can use Compose with a K or other tooling to kind of rough out what the Kubernetes manifest for this would look like. So the last thing, I'll share a screen because I think we're almost out of time. But the last thing that I didn't get into, but is in this Graphtastic org, is local dev, which is that. Oh no, it's here. Where did I put it? It's here. Now I'll have to find it later. The current version of it, but it's that K3D local environment that uses traffic because that comes out of the box, but doesn't use the bundled one, but you know, does modern traffic as well.
I was going to say, for running it locally, I know you're currently using Docker Compose. You might look at using dev file.
What's it called?
Dev file. It's
is
the
this
same
the
format
thing
that
that-
GitHub Codespaces uses.
Oh, okay. I'll look at this. That's a great idea. I wanted
It
to make
solves roughly
this
the same
accessible to
problem,
people.
but is clearly focused towards development as opposed to like, oh, well,
Okay.
maybe you'll use this to run a production
Well, so
instance.
yeah, I actually started with Kubernetes manifests and Helm and using some operators, and
Yeah,
it's just it
it's
makes it a
heavyweight.
bear to engage with for somebody
Yeah.
who might want to come in and just do a minor contribution. So but I'll take a look at this as well. Thank
Yeah.
you. But yeah, Jen, do you have any other, like, I had alluded to having worked on some designs. I'd love both of your feedback, maybe when you have time to give it a read. And when I have some things that you can run locally to see it all working, which shouldn't take too much longer. I've already got some subgraph stuff up. I'd love to demo it and then see what people think. But by the way, now you can see why I didn't want to do it all in the TOC repo, because the whole way this is managed is like spokes and hubs can be versioned and built and run independently, or they can be federated together, and it's done by vendoring in different repos.
Well, I think the vendoring might be a thing that we'd want to, figure out how to do where you didn't actually have to check in all the stuff.
Well, actually,
Like,
so by
through a
vendoring,
build
I
or
don't mean
something like that.
copying. I mean, I'm actually like the tooling Git clones all of the environments that have Docker Compose but connect to a shared network. And there's some shared tooling to facilitate that, so that like when you're working on this, you can just go into, you've got all the code local and you can go make changes across repos, right? And then each one of them from there, you can just push to branches. Like it's not doing a big messy file copy or anything like that. I'd also delved into some of the nasty sides of the GitHub template repository feature, where you can make repos from a template, but then when you update the template, how do you update the repos? I have a solution for that I don't love, which is like a GitHub action that runs in the template repo when it gets released that goes and makes PRs against all of the things that came from it. But those have invariably changed, and those are going to turn into messy PRs.
I was going to say, do it the other way anyway.
Well, you could run it from either side, but there are some GitHub actions that, in a secure way, ostensibly, actually can do some of this, because many organizations will say only actions defined in this repo can be run.
But my point is, if you do it the other way, it allows the people who fork the template to decide whether they want to opt out or not of getting those updates.
Yeah, so this was a spur I went down like
But
Thursday, and
like we've
I just
diverged.
decided to stop it, get something working,
Yeah.
and then worry about templates, because otherwise I'm just making more
Yeah,
work.
no, I agree.
So
Um,
I've kind of jettisoned that to a later phase
I
of the
think it's
project.
fine to do all this exploration elsewhere if you want.
Yeah,
I do
that's
think that as we get things that we feel like a second person or third person could use, we should try to turn them into artifacts that we can put in the TOC repo. I think, exploratory stuff before then, yeah, great.
yeah.
Once it
But
becomes an official like output that we're going to recommend that 3 or 4 people try running, we should try to figure out how to put it in a central place.
Yeah. By the way, there's a whole separate design from a month and a half ago when I was thinking about this, that's based on crossplane instead of using Docker Compose as like a unit of modularity. And it actually works as a design, and I made a POC for it. But if you thought running Kubernetes locally to do development was hard, just start debugging crossplane XRDs and composite resources. Like
Oh,
that just gets to be,
uh-huh.
a big brain twister. Um, Even if you know what it all does, it still could just be
So,
there. But we're way over time now.
um, I
Maggie.
have not been able to produce a list of 10 projects yet that
Really?
I think
It's not
produce
that
this
easy?
box.
Like, surely Kubernetes, there's one, right?
So I threw on the ones we already knew,
Yeah.
including Oscal Compass. And then I've been going through the graduating and incubating projects, going to their documentation and typing the
Uh-huh.
word SBOM in
Okay,
search.
I'm glad Intoto has published as
No,
like
I guessed for Intoto. Intoto is a
they
guess.
must, right? That would be
Intoto doesn't have search on their docs. So I can't actually see if their docs say anything about SBOMs. And if they did, I'd have a lot of stuff. So Intoto is a guess. I think it will actually be an interesting and informative thing.
Yeah.
So I'm leaving it in there.
Okay.
Um,
I would have thought
the
this was
other
gonna
ones I'm pretty sure all have SBOMs.
okay, but still that it was that yeah, we'll circle
I
back
think you're
next
going to
week.
learn some stuff.
That's good. I like to learn. Maybe I've made some assumptions about the state of the ecosystem that I thought were like safe assumptions and were measured, like perhaps a quarter of the projects or maybe most of the I assume graduated projects all had SBOMs published because I had just assumed that would be the case, but um
It's so cute.
it's gonna be eye-opening.
Yes, I think so. Or maybe you're going to be like, hey, Evan, actually, it turns out you're an idiot. And that would be lovely.
I don't think that's the case. I
Well,
mean, I
no,
think
I mean, I want to call out that I had one particular way of doing it. And I was trying to back up a particular assumption. And so, like, please try to prove me wrong because I would be thrilled to be proved wrong.
I don't yeah. Okay. Uh, I'll do that. All right. So if there's nothing else, I could just keep hanging out because I'm socially
Nope.
starved, but we should probably break. Jenna, was there anything that you wanted to get in before we conclude?
Uh,
Oh, you're muted, I think.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted. I said, not right now. I just need to dive deeper into those docs. And I did find one more project that we could look on. I think Harbor has
Okay,
SBOM.
I didn't
Oh,
look at
sure.
Harbor.
Yeah,
Great.
if
Yeah.
Harbor, if that would be another one that if they didn't have it, I'd be really surprised given the nature of the project.